Computer. Look at me go. Okay, awesome. Am I cool to hit start? Anyone else have any questions? Awesome. Okay, we're gonna jump in. Thanks, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna just wait a couple minutes here and let people join in on our Friday webinar. So thanks for taking the time to be here. And while we're waiting for folks to join, as always during these webinars, we love to hear from the audience on any questions that they have. We'd love to have these questions be for our panelists, since that's really the focus of our conversation here today. But we are going to start with a quick update from Commissioner Mitchell. But if you have any questions that are on your mind, you can head into the Q&A and type those up, and then we will try our best to get to them. We'll try to leave 15 minutes at the end for questions. But I think this is probably a great time to start. So Commissioner Mitchell, if you wanted to jump in and give a quick intro and take it away.
Thank you, Michael, for all you do for these. I think it's important to always state this, but the purpose of these webinars is to provide a touch point with you all as Colorado's commissioner. These were originally scheduled to check in and update with Colorado water users and other Colorado stakeholders. I understand that oftentimes, because people are interested in the what's happening, that we have a broader audience, and I'm happy to have anyone join who may be interested. We're all about transparency. So I want to give you, before I turn it over to our esteemed panelists and Michael, I want to give a brief update about the Colorado River post-2026 negotiations. And then I've invited the panel of speakers to address municipal water conservation and urban landscape adaptation. So we'll wrap up with an opportunity to ask some questions of the panel, time permitting. So in terms of post-2026 and where we're at, and the update on that, the status of the negotiations for post-2026 operations of Lake Powell and Lake Mead is as such. Talks are ongoing. The 7 basin states continue to meet regularly, as well as with our federal and tribal counterparts. We're really focusing on working collaboratively to address the significant technical and legal challenges ahead of us. A building block that for the discussion is the Upper Division States Alternative, which Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming submitted to the federal government in March for consideration in the NEPA process. As a reminder, and if you've heard me speak, you've probably heard me talk about the Upper Division States Alternative and what it's about. It's really focused on sustainable management of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, moving from a demand-based system to a supply-based system. We submitted the alternative to help rebuild storage at our nation's 2 largest reservoirs. How you get certainty is that storage, and how you find certainty for the 40 million people is have something in your bank account. So reservoir levels are an indicator of hydrologic conditions, and by tying operations to hydrologic conditions, we would provide an opportunity to rebuild storage and increase resilience in the system. The Upper Division States Alternative, like I mentioned, is a supply driven. In other words, operations are not tied to the demands, but rather responsive to supply. How we do it in the Upper Basin. The Upper Division States Alternative actually performs well under a wide range of hydrologic conditions. So it would essentially rebuild storage at Lake Powell and help to avoid the crisis management that we've seen ourselves in, and that we've been subject to, especially over the last few years. Again, I want to make sure that folks are aware I remain committed to finding solutions that align with what nature provides. And really, we all must acknowledge that we need to live within the means of the river, especially if the river's future looks drier and more variable, which I think it does. Reclamation is currently in the process of developing alternatives for their NEPA analysis, and I believe more information will be released as the process unfolds. So that's just the brief update on post 2026. And now I want to get to why we're here and introduce this amazing panel. So today's panel emphasizes the concept of living within our means. Cities, urban areas, modern landscapes face unique pressures because population growth is happening at the same time that we face risk to our water supply. So the amazing panel we have in front of us is Greg Fisher with Denver Water, Pat Wells with Northern Water, Lisa Pace with Colorado Springs Utilities, and Neal Lurie with Resource Central. And so thank you all for being here today. It's important that we hear all perspectives, and that's really one of the objectives with these webinars. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Michael, and she'll be able to facilitate a discussion with you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell, for introducing our panelists. And I should have said this at the top, but I'm Michael Elizabeth-Sakis, the Colorado River Communications Specialist with the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. And we've been hosting these webinars to help tell the stories and share the voices of folks here in Colorado around issues around the Colorado River. And as Commissioner Mitchell was just saying, Western water providers continue to face a major challenge. How do you serve a booming population when there's less water with climate change driven drought? And we often hear this question from Coloradans, especially related to the Colorado River, because water from the Colorado River serves customers in every corner of the state. So today we've invited our panelists to discuss this challenge and highlight the innovative ways that they are addressing it. So we're really excited to have them here. So we're going to start with Lisa. You told me that you're adding more than 2,000 homes to your service area a year in Colorado Springs. In your position, you focus on outdoor water use and ways people can use less water outside. Can you tell us why this is an important place to focus?
Yeah, so before I jump right to the landscaping, I want to set a little bit of a context. So in Colorado Springs, our city has grown substantially from the 1990s, I think along with most of the Front Range on this panel. And even though that city has grown tremendously, we're actually delivering less water to our customers now than we did in the early 2000s. And a lot of that comes from having a real good foundation of water conservation programs and regulation. So things like developing a landscape code that focuses on our water conservation, and then updating that over the years to also include a turf reduction amount for residential and commercial properties, to our water-wise rules that limit when and how often you can water your outdoor landscape. We've also really worked on educating our customers on what it means to live in Colorado and the limited water supplies that we have naturally. And we worked with our professionals to really get a foundation of a good water management in our community. So once we have all that in place, we then can look at conservation efforts, right? Things like incentivizing landscaping practices to reduce the amount of water we used outdoors. Because during that 20 to 30 years where our population grew, but our water use didn't, what we found is the amount of water used outdoors, these programs, these educations, these different things that we were implementing, including pricing, we found that the outdoor water use reduced from about 50% of the water that we delivered our customers to 35%. So 35% of the water that we're now delivering is being used outdoors, which is still the biggest piece of the pie. So that in itself is really important. But also in that time, what we found is we had some negative consequences that came from all of these practices being implemented in these 20 to 30 years. So for example, We have about 25% of our residential homeowners who aren't watering or deficit watering. And that really creates a strain on especially certain parts of town where their landscapes have gone into neglect, we're losing tree canopy, and the quality of life just isn't as great in some of those areas. We're also seeing a plethora of artificial turf grass and seeds of rock being installed on brand new properties. So not only do we have kind of a group of people we want to bring up and improve their landscape sustainability and also just resiliency and beauty in the city, we have another section of people who are installing practices that aren't sustainable long term and sometimes causing other issues like problems with stormwater runoff related to those artificial turf grass areas. So as employees who live and work and care for our community, we know that landscapes add a tremendous amount of value to where we live, and that right now we're faced with a big challenge. We need to figure out a better solution to how we landscape in our community. And I like what Becky said in terms of looking to nature and living within what nature gives us, and that's a lot of what we're trying to do. Is we're really looking to nature for clues on how to landscape responsibly. And so even though our community is continuing to grow, we want to find these solutions that, one, support ecology, but two, give us a beautiful place to live and work while using our water resources responsibly and really stretching those to the furthest. Mm-hmm. So that's our answer.
Great. And we've talked before, and it sounds like commercial construction has really embraced this concept of working with native grasses and plants, but it sounds like it's been more of a challenge to get those new residential construction projects on the same page. Can you tell us a little bit more about this challenge and what you've been doing to try to address it?
Yeah, so with this, we find that, HOAs, parks, school districts, college campuses, they're all into the idea of replacing their high water turf grass or non-functional turf grass with a better native solution. And a lot of time that's driven by the cost savings. So, we have incentives to rip out and replace these areas and put in a native grass option that uses 60 to 80% less water. And the savings for water and maintenance long-term is a good reason for them to do it. Now, on the new construction side, especially for residential, this seems to be an area that has its own unique challenges. And we really find that with water conservation where we're at, it's not a one-fits-all approach that's going to get us to where we need to be. That trend line of increasing population and maintaining or decreasing water use is not something we can repeat. We're at a place where we got to really target customers that have specific uses, and new construction is one of those, where we're seeing either this artificial and sea of rock, artificial turf grass and sea of rock, or we're seeing semis of high water turf grass coming into these neighborhoods. And so we really want to change what goes into the ground from the beginning that landscape is installed. And when I went out this spring and met with builders, I met with about 20 builders and 2 different developers and tried to persuade them about this new program that we have and get them on board, I found that it's a really big sell for them. They have so many challenges when it comes to building that community and building that house, but the landscaping is really the last step. And they look at it as like the wrapping paper on a present you're going to give somebody, right? It's that finishing touch. It's that beautiful, lawn of green sod that gets rolled out. It's the big bushy plants that create this instant gratification. And with resilient lawns especially, most of those are going to be seeded. And so the process and the idea of really changing that last piece to their puzzle and making it something potentially a little bit more complex and take longer to install is a really hard sell. So I met with them. They all loved the idea. They all loved the concepts. And in the end, I'm meeting with homeowners one-on-one and landscape designers who are working in these communities to really make these changes happen, because I need that homeowner to champion the idea that they really want this resilient landscape, because from a builder's perspective, it's just too complicated to add in the very end of a very long process. So with that, we're really trying to get out there to build capacity and to change the dialogue of what customers are asking for when they're building these new homes. Because a lot of people want it, they just don't know how to achieve it. And with that note, just real quick, so thanks to CWCB and Water Now, we did get a grant to work with the landscape industry to identify a list of skills and knowledge needed to really propel our landscapes into the next 150 years. I always tell people, the way we landscape will last 150 years is not how we're going to landscape for the next 150 years. And we need to start to define what that looks like and then build the capacity to install those and maintain those landscapes. So we'll get a link. Michael will post it at some point. I'll get one up. But if anybody's interested in joining a working group that's specifically going to tackle these long-term issues related to, resilient landscape solutions, then either contact me or we'll get a link in that chat and people can sign up to be part of that working group.
That sounds great. Yeah, and they can contact me as well, and we'll make sure to get them a link to that. So this is a great segue to Neal. You're the president of Resource Central, which is a nonprofit dedicated to helping people save water, reduce waste, and conserve energy. And a big part of your effort is helping people switch from those thirsty, non-native turf lawns to low water gardens or alternative ground covers. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about Resource Central?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Michael. If there's one thing we've learned at Resource Central over the course of the last 50 years or so that we've been in existence is that if you make it easy for people to make changes and upgrades to their homes and to their yards, they are eager to be part of the solution. So through the years, our nonprofit has been able to help people make improvements to their homes, to their landscaping, and other incremental steps there. We've had more than 900,000 people participate in our conservation programs through the years. And a few things that we've learned. First, if you make it really, really easy for people to participate, and you actually provide a small incentive for people to participate, when you have that combination of environmentally good and economically compelling, it becomes a no-brainer for people to participate. Many of you who've been in Colorado for a while may recall that back in 2002, we had a major drought here in Colorado. And it was right around that time that our nonprofit started working with a whole bunch of landscape architects to figure out how do we make it easier for people to transition from thirsty, grassy yards to water-wise gardens. So we were able to create a new program called Garden in the Box shortly thereafter. It's a really cool program where we're actually able to provide water-wise garden kits with about 15 to 30 starter plants, and they're perfectly tailor-made for the Colorado climate. They only use about half the water of traditional turf grass lawns, and we even provide a plant and care guide and a plant-by-number design so people know how to lay it out to be able to make it look beautiful in your yard. When we first launched this program, we weren't exactly sure what the response would be in the community. The first year, I think we sold, maybe about 100 or so of these water-wise garden kits. But it's really taken on off to the point where we're truly able to start advancing a new mission, a new vision to help make water-wise yards the new norm in Colorado. The Garden in the Box program, together with our other water conservation programs, have been able to help people conserve here in Colorado more than 1.8 billion gallons of water and more than 100,000 people participating. So I think what we've been able to conclude is that people really do want to be part of the solution. You need to be able to make it easy for people to participate. You need to be able to provide tools that they don't have to do the research. The bottom line is if it's complicated and they have to do the research, they'll put it off. If you make it easy, they'll participate. And by being able to do that in collaboration with water utilities across the state, more than 50 water utilities across the state, we're now in a position where it truly is a statewide solution to be able to help people save water year after year after year. We started an impact study about a year and a half ago to figure out how do we quantify the water savings. We did this in collaboration with local conservation research experts and having a chance to have more than 1,000 local and regional participants. And we found that on average, the typical 100 square foot garden in the box helps people save on average about 5,000 gallons of water per year. That's 5,000 gallons of water year after year after year. So if you start multiplying that times, tens of thousands of participants, no one solution in itself will solve all of the challenges we have on the Colorado River, but it's really helping to drive change there in a way that I think we can really be proud of being able to move the needle and leaving more water in the Colorado River.
And through this program, you've certainly learned a lot about what prevents a homeowner from making that switch from something like Kentucky bluegrass to, say, a garden of yarrow or other drought-tolerant plants. Can you tell us what you've learned about what it is that people need and the ways that you've created programs to actually support those efforts, like removing grass?
Yeah, so we had a chance to do a study a few years back with Colorado CSU, and through the university, we're able to test 4 different incentives. What is the big barrier that gets people, that prevents people from making changes to be able to transition from thirsty grassy yards to water-wise gardens? So we tested all sorts of incentives there. Is it just simply that people need a financial incentive and they'll make the change? Is it that they don't know what to replace that thirsty grassy yard? Is it that the irrigation system is just complicated to try and figure on out? Anyone that's gone through that process knows it's not easy, but it certainly is doable. Or is it the physical turf removal of actually removing the manual labor associated with removing that grass yard? And what we found overwhelmingly through studies and through focus groups was that the physical turf removal, it is a pain in the butt for the typical person to be able to try and figure out. And it wasn't just simply asking people their opinions, it was actually giving people incentives to make those changes, and we're able to see the real world behavior as a result of that. So we started a pilot project to figure out, all right, how do we actually kind of drive that process forward where we could help tackle that physical turf removal barrier, that the physical challenges of removing that grass and what to do about it. We reached out to more than 30 different businesses, to landscape firms, to see would they partner with our nonprofit organization to figure out, the best way to pioneer and scale up, a large-scale residential turf removal program. We couldn't get a single one of those landscape firms to want to partner with us, and we heard the exact same thing over and over again. Landscape firms told us that they're in the business of in the business of maintaining turf grass lawns, not removing turf grass lawns. They want to be mowing them, not removing them. So we actually launched our own, as a nonprofit, launched our own turf removal program where we provide the staffing. We provide, we'll actually bring in sod cutters and a crew to be able to remove the turf grass, and then to be able to responsibly compost the turf sod to make sure that people have a blank canvas for being able to start anew and to be able to have an opportunity to reimagine what their water-wise yard could look like. In doing so, it is completely taken off. There was this real need in the marketplace, and we're just seeing that there's a real interest in people to want to participate. And it's now our fastest growing program. We expect over the course of this year or early next year, we'll have more than 1,000 people participating just in this one lawn removal program, making it the largest one in the state, and it's growing by double digits every year. So it really tells us that there's a lot of interest in the community in being able to help be part of the solution.
Yeah, those numbers are really incredible and very impressive. Very, very neat to see that this trend is taken off. So that's great. So Greg, you work for Denver Water, and that work means analyzing how customers use water and how demographics and climate change might factor into their water use. And you told me that you see climate change as the biggest challenge you face in your role when it comes to future water supplies. Can you tell us more about why that is and what you're seeing here?
Yeah, thanks, Michael and Commissioner Mitchell, for having this panel. I think it's great to just have these conversations. I'm particularly gratified that we work with everybody on this panel pretty closely, and I think the one thing that I very much want to mention is that we are working together more than I've ever seen in my 25 years in the water industry, that we're all learning together and making change together. So it's a great, I think it's just a great movement that we're seeing right now. As for climate change, absolutely. I won't be the first person or the last person to say that that is the single biggest existential threat that we have in the water industry. And I think, the obvious parts are, as it warms, even though the Rocky Mountain area, the jury's still out about what it will do to precipitation, that we're likely to lose snowpack and runoff just as the climate warms. So I think that's the first part of that. Wildfires will continue to grow, putting more pressure on our watershed management. Last week, I think a lot of people saw this. We had 4 wildfires starting a single day in our watersheds, really understanding the impact to that, whether it's runoff, water quality, just the impact to the communities is huge. And then thinking about the communities we serve, Denver in particular is getting more dense. The more concrete we put in, the hotter it gets, so that the phenomenon of heat island effect. And that's really where these landscape programs are really key. And we really have to understand not only how to keep some amount of landscaping in these dense communities, but what types of landscapes are going to survive and thrive as the climate warms and as you have more asphalt and concrete around it. So climate change is pervasive from, all the way up in our watersheds, all the way to where we are serving our customers, and the runoff that we see from storm and wastewater treatment. It is just that single thing that we have to combat. We are continuously planning, and I know all the other water agencies do the same thing. We have 50-year plans, really trying to understand what impacts we may see in climate, and not only preparing, but creating plans for lots of different outcomes. So that we'll continue to work hard, but I think it will take an entire effort from everybody on this panel and many others to try to solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you talked about collaboration, and Denver Water and 29 other water providers across the Colorado River Basin. So we're talking states across the Colorado River Basin signed an MOU committed to removing 30% of non-functional turf, which I know we're talking a lot about here, but that was on a list of a long list of commitments. Can you tell us a bit more about this MOU and the significance of that moment?
Yeah. So our outgoing CEO, Jim Lockhead, in 2022, so if people haven't or have already forgotten about 2022, that was the really sort of put a highlight on the crisis on the Colorado River. And lots of conversations, as certainly they continue, about what to do. I think our CEO, Jim, said water providers need to be part of that, need to be part of the solution. And I think he just wanted Denver Water and water providers to put our best foot forward and say, yes, we want to be part of this. We know that we have a relatively small share of the water use and the withdrawals in the basin, but we also know that we can't just sit by and do nothing. So he created this MOU. More than 30 water providers across the Colorado River Basin have signed it, and it was a commitment to do 3 things. The first was just to expand our conservation efforts writ large. Second was to also continue to reuse our water supplies as in a variety of ways. The third was the most specific, and you mentioned it, Michael. It's to reduce our non-functional turf by 30%. And if anybody hasn't heard this term or doesn't know the definition, generally non-functional turf is turf that the only time you walk on it is when you mow it. It's turf you would find in medians, street medians, tree lawns, commercial areas where it just gets no use. One point that we are all trying to make is that this is not a complete war on grass right now. We know that turf grass has a really important function in our communities, recreation, community events, etc. So we want to be really thoughtful about where turf grass, that high water using turf grass, isn't functional and isn't useful. We want to take that out, replace it with things like what Neal talked about, gardens in a box, really environmentally beneficial landscapes. And it's time for us as Coloradans to really be a lot more intentional about what we're growing and maintaining as landscapes. Because I think it just, not only for the water outlook and the climate outlook, it's really just thinking about how we are going to maintain attractive, livable cities in the future.
You only walk on it when you mow it. That is such a great line, because talking about non-functional turf, it is hard, the different definitions, but I think that really is a good description. So I'm definitely going to use that in the future.
Good.
So since 2000, and we talked about how the really big drought that we're still in, it's still impacting the Colorado River, started around 2000, 2001. And since 2000, Denver water customers have reduced their per capita water use by 36%. So that means your average Denver resident is using 36% less water now than they would have 20 years ago. And these are similar numbers for utilities across the Front Range. Can you tell us a little bit more about those efforts that have gotten us to this point?
Yeah. And to reiterate, Denver Water is not unique in this. A lot of other communities have been doing this. And so again, we're learning from each other and really trying to build on each other's programs to be successful. The other thing I would mention, that 36% reduction is absolutely right. And in fact, what we're doing in total water use is we are using the same amount of water. Our community is using the same amount of water as we did 50 years ago. So we've rolled back water use for 50 years, which is really impressive. And again, not unique to Denver Water. Lots of other communities are doing that. It's been a lot of effort. Certainly starting in the early 90s when we put in a conservation-oriented rate. Those who were here in the middle 90s when the first water efficient toilets came on the market and pretty disastrous. But I think EPA has done a much better job with their WaterSense program, that toilets now are much more efficient, and they are tested for the efficient use, and you only have to flush them once. I'm missing the word. I'm sorry. A lot of other programs like Denver Water, if you all have been here in the last decade or so, we had a very successful program called Use Only What You Need, a marketing campaign that really trying to change hearts and minds around wasting water, saying, okay, we really need to cut our waste down. So things like don't water between 10 and 6, which I think now is the norm for us. We really don't see a lot of people watering during the day anymore. Droughts in the past, like when we looked at 1950s and 1960s droughts, we would ask people to conserve, but then they would go right back to the amount of water they were using in the past. Michael, you mentioned our drought in the early 2000s. We never came back. So our customers reduced their use by 30% and it never came back up. And I think that's really I think we all just became a whole lot more aware of those water scarcity issues. And one thing that I would say we've done customer surveys and focus groups like a lot of other people. And the single thing that we see when thinking about whether or not people will take action for conservation efficiency is their perception of water scarcity. So when we ask our customers, do you think water will become more scarce in the next 10 years, stay the same, or become more abundant? Well over 90% of our customers think water is going to become more scarce. So what that tells us is that they really understand what's going on, and that's driving them to action. So all of those things are really helping us have a really present customer group and motivated to make more changes. And I would say the 36% has been great, but what you're hearing on this panel is that we have more to do beyond that.
Thanks, Greg. And before we jump to Pat, and before I forget, I'm going to send that form to folks, and it's a link that the workshops that Lisa had mentioned. So that is now in the chat for everyone. So thank you, Lisa, for getting me that link. Great. So yeah, let's talk to Pat. You're a water strategy specialist with Northern Water, and Northern Water has a very diverse user base with different water needs: agricultural, municipal, industrial, and domestic sectors. Can you start by explaining what makes Northern's system unique?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Commissioner Mitchell, for getting us all together today for this conversation. Yeah, as you mentioned, Northern Water is situated a little differently from the other municipal water providers that have gone before me today on this panel. We are a water conservancy district whose role is to cooperatively manage the Colorado Big Thompson project. That brings water from the headwaters of the Colorado River to the east slope of Colorado throughout northeastern Colorado, where we serve approximately 615,000 acres of irrigated agriculture land, as well as over 1 million residents. So the Colorado Big Thompson project is a project that was born out of the Dust Bowl days in the 30s. When persistent drought and dust storms were causing numerous farmers to go under. And it was recognized that there just wasn't enough water in our region with our native supplies to meet our current and future water needs. So the Colorado Big Thompson project is designed to bring a supplemental supply of water to add to our native water supplies. And what's really unique about the CBT project and how it operates is we operate on a quota system. And what that does is it allows us to increase or decrease the amount of water we deliver to all of our allottees based on hydrologic conditions, the need of our allottees, and the overall health of our water supply system. So in years when our storage levels aren't healthy, we may not deliver as much water. In years where there's a lot of native supply available within our basin, we also tend to back off our supplemental water that we bring to northeastern Colorado from the Colorado River Basin. Over time, our role and mission has changed. A lot of what we do stays the same, but we've also added to our mission, and that includes developing a really robust conservation program where, again, we supplement the resources and the great programs that have been put in place over the years from our 34 municipal water allottees. So we supplement through programs like consultations and audits, irrigation and landscape resources, classes and trainings. We also have a very robust grant program where we've given out over $200,000 over the last year to support things like landscape transformation, audits and consultations, and enhancing the water conservation programs of our constituents within Northern Water District boundaries.
And one of the biggest challenges that you mentioned to me is witnessing water supply risks develop faster and more intensely than a lot of water managers previously planned for. Can you tell us more about what you're seeing here in Colorado?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've always been challenged with living within our means, with dealing with hydrologic variability, particularly here in northeastern Colorado, where we live in kind of a high desert plain sort of environment. And what we've seen over numerous years, and I think this applies pretty much to all of the panelists here, and what they're seeing is there's this real development of these low probability, high risk events and occurrences. We're seeing a lot of those develop earlier and be more frequent and more intense than we originally planned. I think the wildfires that Greg mentioned and that we've seen out our door the last couple of weeks is evidence of that, as well as the East Troublesome Fire and the Cameron Peak fires that Northern Water was certainly dealing with in recent years. Just the way that those manifested, how intensely those fires developed, and how challenging it was to get those under control was just a good example of how these new risks develop. And then what we're seeing on top of that is that these risks have a greater chance of compounding or laying on top of one another. So at the same time you're dealing with water providers are dealing with wildfire, we may also be dealing with infrastructure failure or aging infrastructure. And the Colorado River situation is a really good example of something that a lot of water providers become very focused on operating their system and dealing with their individual water system risks. But we've had to think much more globally, and we've had to become educated in what's happening on a basin state level, because things that were maybe a 3 to 5% probability a decade ago, as far as Lake Powell dropping below 35-25, we're now seeing that the probability of that has increased substantially over the past 5 to 6 years. So these are things we're planning for. And to Greg's point, these advancements in how we plan and how we model and how we do scenario planning is allowing us to look at things like the sensitivity of our water systems to things like climate change. And what we're finding is that our water systems are fairly sensitive to increases in temperature and decreases in precipitation. And when you add that we have growing communities and that our future will include increased water demands, that makes the equation even more challenging. I think where there's some good news is that we found through the last 20 years that humans are very adaptable, water providers are very adaptable, we're collaborating like never before. And a lot of this, in many cases, comes down to just a retiming exercise. So if we're able to utilize our infrastructure, if we're able to build and maintain storage, if we're able to be creative in how we adjust our systems and rise to the challenge, I think we can definitely manage through this, particularly if we're talking to each other on both the supply side and the demand side, and kind of managing for both sides of the equation.
And I'm going to ask you one more question before we jump to a couple audience questions. Northern Water serves both agricultural users and municipalities. And when the state experiences drought or water supply shortages, you've been able to leverage that flexibility to keep agriculture viable. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that has helped when it comes to this water sharing flexibility?
Yeah, that's another great question. In 1957, when we began full deliveries through our CBT project, our deliveries were about 97% to agriculture and roughly 3% to municipalities. Over time, that's changed, and our first use of CBT water these days is sitting at around roughly 57% of our deliveries go to M&I use, and 43% goes to agriculture. What we do at Northern Water and the way that that our system has developed, the way our users in northeastern Colorado use water, is we have a very flexible way that we're able to allocate CBT units and trade them flexibly. And we also have numerous programs that Northern Waters stood up over the past several years, including a really robust CBT rental program where agriculture is able to rent from municipal interests and vice versa. We have a carryover storage program that allows us to carry water over year to year. A regional pool program that allows the owners of CBT water units to kind of leverage their investments in CBT units to kind of trade water and share water across water use sectors and with other water users within our region. So I think the name of the game is flexibility and adaptability within our region. And then for those municipal water providers in northeastern Colorado who have acquired changed ag water rights, they've done such an amazing job of conserving water and of managing their portfolios that a lot of their forecasted demands have been pushed back or have flattened. And that's actually allowed them over the course of several years and even decades to be able to free water from their portfolios back up to share with nearby agriculture who are our nearby neighbors and who they may share a ditch company system with. To actually perform municipal leasing and leaseback programs to ag. And all of that helps agriculture stay viable. It helps them finish off crops at the end of the season and is kind of just a good way that we kind of envision almost a one water process functioning up here in northeastern Colorado.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for answering questions so far. We're going to jump to a couple audience questions, but first I just want to give a couple of quick comms, just reminders. We have our Colorado River Commissioners Corner. It's the place where we keep things updated on events and news coverage and a way to request speaking events. Just always want to give people a quick reminder that that exists. There's also really great infographics that we've been updating and we'll be adding new ones soon. And then also, if you are going to Colorado Water Congress later this month, Commissioner Mitchell is hosting 15-minute one-on-one meetings with individuals or small groups of folks, and we have a couple of slots left. So if you are interested in possibly meeting with Commissioner Mitchell, you can email us. We ask that you email us by August 13th, and the email's on the screen, but it's DNR_Colorado River at state.co.us. So again, if you are already attending Water Congress later this month and you'd want to chat with Commissioner Mitchell, it's a great opportunity. And then I think that's it for a little update. So if anybody has any other questions they want to type in, but we're going to go to a couple of now. So for the utilities, to the extent you didn't already address this, could you please touch on your agency's perspectives, opportunities, and challenges relating to turf restrictions on new residential developments? We did talk about this a little bit, specifically with Lisa, but if other folks want to jump in or if Lisa has anything else to add, that would be great.
I can chime in a little bit. It's a great question, and so we helped lead some of the statewide legislation in the 2024 legislative session that would prohibit non-functional turf in more public areas. So it did not get into residential areas, and we were pretty intentional about that, and I think a lot of the bill sponsors were as well, that may be more of a local conversation. So I know that the city of Denver does want to have that conversation about what regulations may be put into place. I think it's a harder conversation, frankly, because I don't know that you can designate a particular area that is not functional, because I know there are a lot of communities where you use your front yard. There are a lot that use your backyard. So I think it's harder to just designate these specific areas, but there may be some conversation about limits of the amount of turf you might have per home. But more conversation to come, but that it's very much an open question for us and the local communities that we serve.
Thanks for that, Greg. Really appreciate it. Does anybody else want to add? Lisa?
I'll just add something small. So I think, in the conversation of reducing non-functional turf grass, I think in many ways people have approached it as kind of a, the silver bullet. And what we've found is similar to Greg. That's not the case for us. It really depends on a case-by-case basis. But I also think what's really important is not to overlook. We live on the Front Range. We have a lot of shortgrass prairie, and we have wonderful grasses that we can use as alternatives for our front yards, whether they're functional or not. And really developing that concept of using native grasses as our predominant landscape cover, I think has a lot more opportunity and room for development, and it just supports our natural ecosystem so much better than some of the other things that get put in place, including a lot of rock. But we really believe that's a fantastic future, and we're so lucky here in Colorado to have that as a great option for us. So I think often we talk about non-functional turf grass replacement, but we forget that we have really amazing native options to fulfill that void as well.
Thanks for that, Lisa. Anybody else want to add on that? Okay, wonderful. So we'll move on to Neal and Resource Central. Audience member wants to know, do you work with HOAs on shared or park areas?
Yeah, it's a great question there. We do. HOA is an important partner in the water conservation process. It's complicated because a lot of the people who are participating in that HOA decision-making process oftentimes hear from some of the loudest community members there, which can make it really challenging to be able to make any sort of changes within an HOA. We've really found it helpful to be able to meet HOAs where they are. There are a lot of HOAs that are looking to be able to make sure that they can water more efficiently. So we actually offer a really impactful program called Slow the Flow, where for those HOAs that do have some shared areas with turfgrass yards, we can actually help those HOAs make sure that they're watering those yards, watering those lawns more efficiently to really optimize that water usage. We've been able to help many HOAs throughout Colorado to be able to just make sure they're not overwatering some of the sections of the yard that exist. Increasingly, we are hearing interest from HOAs in being able to remove some of that turf grass lawn and are able to help with them through that process as well. Thanks to a great collaboration we have with CWCB, we're now actually piloting and testing different approaches for removing larger portions of turf grass lawn at scale, including for HOAs or potentially commercial properties. And I think that by being able to test different approaches, we'll be able to look at how we can do things more efficiently and help make it easier for those HOAs that are looking to make changes to be able to do so as inexpensively and easily as possible.
Okay, great. And this next question is for Greg. We have seen large developments in the Denver metro area. How does Denver Water manage water distribution? Some may suggest we are overbuilding. How would you respond to that? And part two, how do public parks and open spaces fit into this?
It's a great question. So I think we continuously, I think development is one of those really interesting challenges, whether you're in a very dense area like we're serving or in the suburbs, and trying to understand what capacity needs are around your city. I'll just give you a quick example. We recently have viewed the updated development plans for the Denver airport, and we expect to see significant growth there. So really, in Pat and I both mentioned this, so we try to do a lot of scenario planning because there are a lot of different outcomes. There are a lot of different time frames for that development. So we're continuously evaluating how demand is changing, how our city is developing. So I would say we have a really good process without giving you a really specific answer. We have a really good process that anytime major infrastructure goes into place, we bring all of those pieces together, whether it's demand profiles, development profiles, even other demographic data to really understand what the right capacity is. And I would agree that there is a danger of missizing that infrastructure. And that's why we're really intentional about that. And missizing either up or down. We want to make sure we're getting it right so that we're not incurring too much cost, or sizing it too small so that we're not meeting our customers' needs. What was the second part of that, Michael? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, no problem. Let me revisit that question. How do public parks and open spaces fit into this?
Yeah, so they are really taking a leadership role. Denver Parks in particular deserve a shout out. So they have done a master plan recently, and I don't want to misquote this, but their long-term plan is really the majority of their areas that they maintain will be native, will be converted to native areas. So I think we will see a lot less bluegrass, but should not see any diminishment of how we use parks and the enjoyment and utility we get from those parks. So we really see them as partners and leaders in a lot of ways in terms of managing the public spaces, because again, for us, as we get more dense and we have less lawn in our own homes, we now have more multifamily households than we have single family households. Public spaces become so much more important in how they're managed.
Yes, great point. And that's a question that I think, others can chime in on if they'd like to. We have about a minute left.
Michael, I'd like to just add from Northern Water's perspective, we've been really successful at convening stakeholders through the Growing Water Smart Partnership with Sonoran Institute. So currently over 80% of our municipal allottees have gone through that program, which is intended to address water use and land use nexus issues and create action plans that include a lot of really innovative ways to look at merging land use code updates with water use calculations and water dedication requirements. And we'll have our latest installment come in September, where we'll continue proceeding forward with that. And I think the other items we're pursuing in relation to parks, a lot of our area, because we do intermingle agriculture and municipal uses throughout our region, we're looking at things like dual distribution systems, where we can not only serve a park, but maybe also irrigate agricultural lands. That gives us opportunity to achieve efficiencies on both the ag side and the park side, and looking at ways to kind of maximize that local native base supply to apply it to the right use for the right location, particularly for parks. And was driving through Fort Collins the other night and just found some beautiful examples of where some of the bluegrass turf areas on ball fields transitioned beautifully along the ditch systems to native grass. And so it can be done. It can look really attractive, and it adds to the character of our region here in northeastern Colorado.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pat. Well, we're right here at the end, so I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it. So I want to say thank you all so much for taking the time to be part of this panel. Thank you to everyone who's joined us here on Friday. Thank you for the questions. I apologize that we weren't able to get to all of them, so I'm just going to throw my email in the chat there, michael.sakis@state.co.us. You can follow up with me and we can try to get answers to your questions. But yeah, thank you so much. And I see Commissioner Mitchell's turned her camera on, so I don't know if she wants to say a quick goodbye.
I just wanted to say thanks, and you all are all part of the solution of what we need to be doing into the future, and that's really, again, responding to what Mother Nature's telling us, and you all are leaders in that. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time on a Friday afternoon. I know that was a lot to ask.
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner Mitchell. Thank you all. And we will have a webinar. We're planning for one in October. So you can head to the CWCB calendar as we kind of add more webinar dates into the year. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.